The committee is delighted to have you in front of them this morning and look forward to your testimony. You have 5 minutes, sir, and the time is yours. Turn that microphone on, if you would, please.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Womack and Co-Chair Lowy, for holding today's hearings on reforms to Congress's budget and appropriation process. The American people are justifiably frustrated with Congress and our inability to do our most basic job, pass a budget and fund the government. I applaud the work of this Joint Select Committee for holding this critically important hearing to look at potential reforms to fix our broken budget and appropriation process. I want you to know I find myself thinking about you a lot in this committee, and I hope you feel me cheering in the background for your success. As a relative newcomer to Congress, many members of this committee likely don't know who I am, so I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce myself. I'm John Curtis. I have the great honor of representing Utah's 3rd Congressional District. Before coming to Congress last November in a special election, I was mayor of Utah's 3rd largest city, Provo, Utah, for 8 years. Like many of you, having served in local or state government, I've had to make hard decisions needed to balance a budget, especially when that involved cutting spending. I'm proud to say that as a mayor, we balanced our city's budget every single year, including my first year in 2010, when we were required to close a gap of 8% between revenues and expenses. Not only did we do it without raising taxes, but we also increased the level of services given to our residents and at the same time improved employee morale. Those who know Utah know that some of Utah's core values are fiscal responsibility and restraint. These Utah values of fiscal responsibility and restraint are best demonstrated by the fact that Utah's state constitution requires, by law, that the state and city government balance their budgets every year. To maintain a balanced budget, we rely on many good policies and restraints on lawmakers. But I'm here today to share with you only one of those practices that I believe, if adopted by the federal government, could dramatically change the quality of our budgeting process. The idea was born when a former governor threatened to veto the entire budget if the legislature didn't include her pet project. The idea is not unique to Utah, and it's not revolutionary. In fact, it's almost too simple. In Utah, we call it the baseline budget. At the first of every legislative session, the legislature adopts a baseline budget. This is largely the previous year's budget. Therefore, the default, if we fail to come to agreement, is the continuation of last year's budget. Natural inflation puts pressure on the legislative body to come up with a new budget. But while we do so, we are under no threat of a government shutdown. Think of it as a kindler and gentler continuing resolution. It allows for the important wheels of government to keep churning while we, void of pressure, study and deliberate without throwing hundreds of government responsibilities into a tailspin. I've been in Congress for only 7 months, and I've voted on 4 continuing resolutions, and I've seen 2 shutdowns. Each time I felt like a hostage with no option. As members of Congress, we were given a several hundred-page spending bill, often with only a day or 2 to consider it, and told that if we don't vote in support of the legislation, the government will likely shut down. When this happens, there is simply no way to do our jobs as promised back home. By passing a baseline budget, or essentially adopting the previous year's budget at the beginning of the legislative session, the state legislature is able to make meaningful adjustments to the spending levels for next year's budget without a threat of a government shutdown if they fail to come to an agreement. Utah is doing a lot of things right, and I believe this baseline budget process is one of many that Congress can learn from states like Utah. I strongly recommend that the Select Committee study Utah's baseline budget process and consider recommending that it be adopted in Congress's budgeting and appropriation processes moving forward. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today, and with that, I yield my time.
Thank you, Representative Curtis, for your testimony.